Since I put out a video on Fresh just recently, I've been asked by you to do a comparison of Bun versus Fresh, which I found kind of interesting because Bun is a replacement for Node and Fresh is a replacement for Next. So how do you compare those two things? Well, I thought about it for a second. I'm like, actually, I think I can do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to compare Next on top of Node to Next on top of Bun to Fresh on top of Deno and see how that all compares. And then you want to stick around to the end because I will give you some advice on Bun in particular and how to avoid some of its pitfalls. Let's get right into it. Okay, so I've got my VS Code up here. I've got a directory that has just currently a music API in it. And what we're going to do is we're going to build a music Next application to sit on top of this API that we have. And I'll get into that API in a second, but let's start out by building our Bun application. So I'm in that directory now, and I'm going to do Bun create, and then I'm going to do Next to select the Next template. And then I'm going to do Next music. And well, that's it. How cool is that? So I'm going to go into that Next music directory, and then I'm going to do what it tells me to do, which is do bun dev. And I'm going to bring up localhost. And I mean, you can see why people are super excited about how fast Bun is. I mean, that was just crazy fast. Not only was it crazy fast to make the project, just firing out the project was just crazy fast. So, okay. Well, what we're going to do next is we're going to kind of pare this down because, we don't really need that. So I'm going to go into that Next music, and it looks just like a standard Next app. Got pages in there, index, looks very similar to everything we've ever seen before. I'm just going to get rid of a lot of this stuff since we don't need it. And let's see, I'm going to pare this all the way down to just a div. And that div is going to say hello from Next. Cool, right? And we'll take a look and see. There you go. Hello from Next. Awesome. And so because we want to go and compare the speed of Bun to Node, we want to be able to run this both with Bun and with Node. So what we're going to do is we're going to just hack on the package JSON here a little bit and make that happen. You can actually do this in a Bun created project. You can actually have it run on top of Node. And the way that you do that is you go ahead and say scripts, and I'm going to say dev node, and then I'll just do next dev, just like that. But I do want to be able to do them both simultaneously, so I'm going to put this on port 3001. Okay, so let's try this out. I'm going to do yarn dev node. And now I'm going to get this stuff about how we don't have the types in there. So I'll go and copy those two, and then I'll do bun add. Remember, Bun is a package manager replacement as well. So it does Node, it does NPM. It's kind of an all-in-one thing, and we'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, so I'm going to do bun add, and then I'm going to add those two libraries. Actually, I'll do it in D for dev mode. Let's see how that goes. Okay, well, added, that's fine. And then I'll run it again. And we get some issue around types React. It doesn't seem to want to pick it up. What I found after some experimentation was if I just take this down to like 18.1 like that, and then I do yarn again, and then I do yarn dev node, now it complains a little bit, but it runs just fine. So there we go. Now let's see, it's not running on 3000, but if I go to localhost 3001, it runs just fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another terminal here. And that's going to be our node terminal because it's running Node. So I'll rename it to Node. And I will rename this terminal to Bun. So let's go over to our Bun terminal and go into our Next music and then do bun dev. Okay, so now I've got both of them running simultaneously, one on 3000 and one on 3001. So 3000 is Bun and 3001 is Node, right? Yes, that's the way it is. Okay, so how do we go and test some performance on this? Well, I've got this cute little utility I installed. I just did npx install g auto canon. So this is a thing that basically just fires a bunch of requests at your site. So I'm going to start off first on the node site. So I'll do auto canon, HTTP localhost 3001, right? And when it's fired up, and see what we get. So it's going to run, boom, 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 boom. And if we go, I think, well, let's see over here. Do we see anything? No, we don't really see anything. It's done its compilation. So there you go. Oh, and it's given us some results. Okay, cool. So it's given us some latency results. So 14.4 millisecond latency. And it's giving us 664 requests per second. So that's pretty good, actually. So let's do the same thing on Bun. So I'm going to do auto canon. And again, do HTTP. But this time I'm going to do 3000 because that's our Bun port. So let's hit enter. And boom, 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 boom. Now this is doing 10,000 requests. And we'll see how we did here. So kind of some weird numbers. 81 requests per second. Latency was kind of high. Let's go back over to our visual code and take a look at Bun. And what we find is that Bun segfaulted. And so this was, during my experimentation, one of the things that I ran into quite a bit, which was, at least in dev mode, you couldn't really hit the server all that hard. So what I need to do is kind of scale this back a little bit and not hit it quite so hard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do autocannon. I'm going to say that we only want 2,000 requests, and we only want like 5 workers at a time on that, 5 continuous connections. And boom. Okay, cool. So, all right, better. So this is giving us a request per second around 662 with a kind of reasonable latency. Okay, so we have a big empty spot up here for fresh. So let's go and create our fresh version of this and see how it performs. So I'm going to create a third terminal here, and this will become our fresh terminal. Close up these files. Then I'm going to do Deno, and I'm going to look through my Deno, and there we go. Okay, so I'm going to do Deno run, and then I'm going to give it this URL for fresh. That's going to go and download the code to set up fresh, and this is my project name, Fresh Music. So I'll hit return, and it'll start doing its thing. I will say that we don't want Tailwind, and don't worry about VS Code. You're good. And then I'll go into Fresh Music, and I will do Deno task start. And that's going to put us on port 8000. That's fine. And there we go. There's our app. So that's pretty quick too, I got to say. So let's go over here to Fresh Music and see what we got. So we got routes, and the equivalent in the Fresh world is index.tsx, much like our next stuff. So it's got a set of default stuff in here. I'm just going to do, again, that div hello from fresh. And I'm going to get rid of the counter island. And there we go. So that's probably the simplest thing we can do. Hello from fresh. Awesome. And now let's do the same thing. Let's autocannon that. So autocannon localhost 8000. Okay, take a look at the numbers we got. Ooh, whoa, okay. So we got on average 7,000 connections per second with a very low latency. So kind of a stunning difference, I would say, between the two systems here, or the 3 systems as it were, with Fresh, Bun, and Node. Okay, but I gotta say, it doesn't really kind of show realistically what we have, right? We don't make an app that basically just says hello, right? We make an app that connects to an API and then renders the results of that API. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to start using that music API that is built into this project. Now, of course, all of this project code is available to you on GitHub for free. There's a link to it in the description down below. Now let's go bring up our terminal, and we're going to go into our music API directory. So what's in there? So in that music API, we've got some source, and that source is a music chord builder source. So what it does is you give it the specifications you want for a chord. Say it's got to be on a guitar, it's got to be a certain, major whatever on this note, and it goes and gives you all the potential locations that you can play that chord on a guitar. And that is a computationally intensive task. There's a lot of combinatorics there. So you don't want to do that on the fly. You want to go and do that once and cache the results. And that's what this cache directory is. And it exists in the GitHub repo, so you don't have to run it. So it's basically just these big blobs of JSON. And within those blobs, there are an array of different chords, and those each one has notes, and that's what we're going to actually render onto the page. So the first thing we need to do is actually vend this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into that cache directory, and I'm going to run npx serve on port 8080. So let's do port equals 8080 to set our environment variable, and then npx serve. Okay, so here we go. We got our cache, and I'll take a look at the 7th. Yeah, nice. Okay, so we got our notes and all that. It's pretty cool. Now, I don't want to go and hamstring our applications by having them call a slow API. So let's go and do our autocannon against serve and see just how fast it can do results. So I'm going to go and grab that URL, and I will clear these out. And then I'm going to do autocannon on this top one on our guitar chord, standard 6, 7, 0, whatever. Okay, so run. And we get a pretty solid throughput. Low latency, 5,000 on average requests per second. So it's not a super fast performing API, but I don't think it's actually going to slow us down considerably. I will say, though, I did try to use a Rust static web server in this example because I was like, yeah, we should really use the fastest thing we can. And it was like 6 times faster for sure. But the problem was that Node handled it okay and Deno handled it okay, but Bun was having a problem with its zlib and not getting parsing the gzip response properly. So that's unfortunate. So yeah, just a small glitch on the Bun side with that one. Okay, so we're going to be going with this one. I think this is the fastest I could find. So let's go and make our apps go and call that API. So first thing we'll do is we'll go over to our next app that we're pretty familiar with. So next music, and we'll go here into pages, and we'll go to index. And we are going to want to export an async function for get server props. And that's going to return props, which are going to have some chords. And then we're going to want to go and fetch that URL. So let's go over here and grab it. And from that, I'm going to get the chords, which are going to be the JSON response from that. And let's just go and stringify that to make sure that we got the result that we want. That's going to come in as chords, and chords is going to be an array of objects that have an array of numbers in them. That's all we really care about. Okay, let's take a look at our home. And we're getting back nothing. It's because this chords is empty. So let's just do chords. Oh, there we go. So next handle is just fine. Let's take a look and reboot our Bun server. So Bun, need to reboot it. Yep, cool, that works great. And let me just go rename this to our fresh server, or fresh. And this is going to be our API. So I know which ones are which. Cool, okay. So now we need to get fresh to do the same thing. So we need to do the fresh variant of this. So let's go over here to fresh music and into our routes again. Okay, so in fresh world, what you need to do is define a handler. So a handler is basically what handles the incoming request. And if you've got any kind of API that you want to call, that's the right place to do it. So you first define a handler. And within that handler, you render your app. So you just call render like that. So let's go and get our fetch and bring that in. So I'm going to render with chords, and that chords comes in now as data. So now we need to define this using page props. Okay, so we got our data coming in here, and now we can go and JSON stringify it. Just to make sure that it's working. And there we go. Wow, that was really quick. So we do want to make sure that it's got the right typing on it. So let's go and change that from this to our definition of a chord. Cool. All right, that looks good. But of course, what we want to do is a little bit more elaborate than just JSON stringifying some data. We want to actually output every chord as its own component. So let's go and create a component function. And we're going to get in a chord. And that chord is going to have notes in it. And then we're just going to return a div that has, well, in this case, we will just JSON stringify those notes in the chord. Cool. And let's see, let's wrap that up. Got our component there, and now we need to go through this data and map it. And with that, we get a chord. And with that chord, we want to call our chord component and give it the chord. Okay, let's go take a look. Nice. That's pretty fast. Okay, so we want to basically do exactly the same thing over on next. So let's go take our chord component over here, and we'll take our map. I'll put that in here. Of course, in our case, it's called chords. And it also wants us to do the keying stuff. So I'm going to do I, and then don't do this at home. Key I, like that. Let's see. Oh, works great. Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so now we are going and making a request to our API, and we're rendering it on Bun, on Node, and on Fresh. And so we've got kind of a realistic app going on here. So let's go and do our autocannon thing again. So up on, let's try Bun first. So I'll do autocannon again. Let's fire it up and see how it goes. All right, so our requests per second are down to 200. Let's try that on Node. Okay, we got a drop. We got it down to 142 requests per second. So we can start to see that Bun is allowing us to do more pages, which means that it's more performant when it comes to requests. Let's go make sure actually that we haven't actually segfaulted again. Bun. Okay, we're good. All right. And then finally, let's try it on Fresh. So let's see, autocannon on 8,000. All right, so now we're seeing the Fresh is giving us around 1,100, 1,200 requests per second. Bun is around 200, and Node is around 142. So dramatic difference between these two. So let's talk a little bit about why that might be the case. So let's go over here to localhost 8,000 and see what is actually going over the wire. So I do inspect. I come over here to our network, and then I hit refresh. We get localhost, which is 1.5 kilobytes. That is zipped. And then we're getting refresh.js. So getting that's basically the hot reload, as well as an icon and I think an alive ping or something. So very, very small, 24.5 kilobytes transferred. So it's a very, very small output. And more to the point, actually, if I go and view the page source and I line wrap, we can see that really it's just the HTML. That's all you're getting. Basically, so there's no JavaScript that's running on the page beyond this development only hot reload refresh. Literally nothing. So if I go over here to Bun as an example, and I do the same sort of thing, and I inspect, I do network performance, and I do, okay, looking good. Now we got localhost, so a lot bigger, 37.9 kilobytes. That's not zipped, so that's why you're seeing the differential there. But there's a lot of JavaScript that's coming down to the page, which is pretty interesting. I mean, we thought, right, that we rendered everything on the page. Why are we sending any JavaScript to the page? There's nothing interactive going on this page. So let's go over here to our page source and also see what's happening. So do a line wrap again. So we can see that, yeah, we get all of our HTML with all of the arrays in it, but we also get the entirety of everything that we sent in as props from get server-side props. All of that data is coming through. So why is that? Whoa. Okay, this is architectural time. So let's go and look at some diagrams and diagram out why this might be the case. So what we've been dealing with so far is everything on the server. And both of these servers are actually doing similar kind of things. So the first thing we're doing is we are figuring out what the route is when we get a request. Then we're going to make that chord request off of that API. Then we are rendering that React. And then we are turning that into an HTML string along with the data. But only in Next are we actually putting out that data, that big blob of JavaScript data that was right at the end of that HTML file. So why is Next doing that? Well, what it's doing is it's actually going to run your entire app on the client. So what happens is the first thing over on the client that happens is we render that HTML that we have. That's awesome. But then we store that data that we got in for the props. Then we parse that big old bundle that has React and as well as our app in it. And then we rerun our entire app, create a whole new virtual DOM that we then reconcile with the existing DOM that we got from the server back here. And only at that point are we actually interactive with the customer. Fresh, on the other hand, just renders the HTML without the data. And so the only thing that happens is you get the rendering of the HTML and that's it. None of this stuff happened and it's right to interactive with the customer. So what we're seeing here is a fundamentally different approach to serving web pages. React, and in this case Next, start with a supposition that your entire page is going to be built dynamically, both on the server and on the client, whereas islands-based architecture servers like Fresh come at the world from the assumption that the entirety of the page is mostly going to be static with these small areas of client-side interactivity called islands. So you have a sea of a page that's static, and then within that, you've got these islands of interactivity. So in this case, what Fresh is doing is it's saying, hey, there's nothing on this page that is dynamic, and therefore there is no JavaScript that has to go down to that page, and there's nothing about the state that I need to send down along with it and synchronize. So let's think about that in practical terms. Like, let's say that you have a content page where you have a big article and a comment section. Well, that big article that you have at the top is fairly static, right? That's not going to change during the lifetime of the page. That comment section that's at the bottom, that would be your island of interactivity. And so what Fresh does and other island-based systems do is they only send down, in this case, like the comments data, because that's the only thing that actually needs this kind of rendering cycle in it to get it up to date between the server and the client. So you may have a huge app on the server that renders the whole page, but you only send the stuff to the client, the JavaScript to the client that is relevant to the interactive portions of the page. And that's why we're seeing this massive difference in performance between these two. Another critical factor here when you think about this is that Bun is only running on the server. It doesn't run on the client. So when you get over the client, you're now running in the V8 that is embedded inside of Chrome or Internet Explorer or Safari. And so there's a performance slowdown there. You're getting some cool performance benefits from Bun on the server, but you're not actually going to realize that on the client at all. So when people ask me about Bun versus Fresh, it's an entirely different ballgame between those two. Bun is a performance enhancement. It is a way of speeding up the code that we already have, where Fresh is an entirely different take on how to build a site in the first place. And so, yeah, the performance metrics are entirely different. Well, before we're so rudely interrupted by charts and diagrams and all that stuff, whatever, bold, italic, what I was going to do was demonstrate this for you. And it's actually a pretty easy thing to demonstrate. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here and into our next app and say that we want to console log the chord that's coming in. So we'll do chord.notes so we can see it. Now, if we do save here and we go into our Bun output, we can see already that we have on the server side, we have gone and called this chord function. That's what this console log is. Now, if we go over to our app and we do the console, we can see that it's also here. This means that this chord function got run both on the server and on the client. Now, if I go and take the same console log and I take it over to my Fresh app and I put it in here, I hit save. Now I can go over into my Fresh and I will see that, yes, I'm getting the output in the server. But if I go to the client and I go into my console, nothing runs on the client because there's nothing interactive on this page. We've defined no islands, and therefore there is no reason to put any JavaScript on the page. Okay, so I am really impressed by Bun, and I do want to show it off to its best potential. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand on this example just a little bit more before we start getting into some of the other things about Bun. So what I want to do is, well, one, get rid of these console logs. So the next thing I want to do is actually make a bunch of requests here, because sometimes on the server, we actually have to go make a bunch of different API requests in order to get one's page out of it. So I want to kind of simulate that a little bit. So to do that, I'm going to add a list of chord files, basically the same thing as we had before, except more of the same. And then I'm going to use a promise all, wrapping around a map to go through each one of these items in the array, fetch it, and then get the JSON back. And that's going to give us an array of arrays. So I'm going to flatten that. So flat. And this is just going to have basically more chords. All right, let's go take a look. And if I go over into our network panel, we should be able to see that we're getting a much larger size. Oops, probably crashed again. Let's go and fix that. Oh. Okay, there we go. Yeah, but now we're getting 128 kilobytes, so we're getting a much larger result. So I think it's like 536 chords. Similar sort of thing. Yep, getting a big result off that guy. And now let's do the same thing over on Fresh. Take our list of chord files, put up there, and we'll use our code, our promise all code, and then flatten that. All right, let's see. Do we get a bunch? Yep, we got a bunch now. So cool. Actually, let me just make sure by doing like a chord length up here. So I'm going to do data.length. Yeah, 537 chords. Awesome. Okay, so that's a nice big set of data, and it means that we've now done 4 requests simultaneously to go and create that. So what we're going to do next is go and actually rerun our metrics and see how we did. So let's try out Fresh first. Okay, so now we're down to 377 requests per second. Let's do it with Bun. Okay, we're averaging 100. Let's just make sure we didn't crash. Yeah, we're good. Okay, cool. And then finally Node. So around 50, so half. So it's definitely the case that when it comes to doing network I/O or file I/O, Bun definitely improves the performance of your application. So that's when you think about the kind of things that you want to use Bun for, if that's what you're looking for, then I think Bun is a great choice. So my conclusion at this point would be, if you have the opportunity to do something absolutely greenfields and you have a situation where you have static data with islands of interactivity, then going with Fresh is a fantastic way. There are also other island-based servers out there. If you don't like that particular technology, I'll put a link to that, an article that talks about that in the description. If you are in the next world, you want to stay in the next world, certainly Bun is a great thing to look at. But there are some things to look out for, and that's what I want to cover next. And the first one is around library compatibility. So let's go back into our Visual Studio Code, and I'm actually going to shut all of this down. Get rid of a bunch of these. Okay, so now we're going to go back up to the top level, and I'm going to do another Bun create. So I'm going to Bun create next simple app. And in simple app, let's just do Bun dev again. and then bring it up. So as we can see, it's a stock app. Now we want to start using something like, say, Mantine, right? Which is a UI framework. So I'm going to go do bun add Mantine hooks and also emotion react. Cool. And now into my index, I'm going to bring the button from Mantine core. And then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say, hello, Mantine. And this should be fine, right? Bun dev. And we get this interesting exported binding JSX, need to refer to blah, blah, blah. So I went on the Discord server for Bun and looked into this, as well as looking for any documentation around it. And as far as I can tell, it's a known issue, but it hasn't been thoroughly resolved yet. I will say that the Discord community for Bun is fantastic. So that's definitely a plus. But yes, you will run into some compatibility issues with things like Mantine. Now, just to prove that this actually does work in Node, let's go and go through that exercise. We'll go back over here to our package.json and just add some scripts, just like we did before. All right, let's do yarn dev node. And again, we got to go through that rigmarole. So we'll do bun add those libraries with -d. Cool. And then we'll go and demote that to 18.1 and do yarn again and do yarn dev node and hit run. And there we go. Hello, Mantine. Okay, cool. So it really was an issue with Bun as opposed to Node. And you're probably going to run into that with a few of these libraries. So one more issue when it comes to Bun is how it's promoted as essentially a full replacement for Node. Well, actually Node and NPM and a bunch of those utilities. When in reality, it's really just a node that's hyper optimized for throughput type stuff. So you really want to think about Bun in terms of what it can do to help you on your servers or for file IO. When it comes to data crunching, that's probably not something you're going to want to do with Bun. Let me demonstrate that for you. So I'm going to go over to my terminal. I'm going to create a whole new terminal and I'm going to split it vertically. And then I'm going to go into my 2022 Bun versus Fresh and into that music API. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to time Bun doing source build cache.ts. And I'm going to do time with TS node doing the same thing, source build cache. So what this is going to do is this is going to rebuild that directory of cache files. And it's a very computationally intensive task. There's a lot of combinatorics. There's a lot of going and creating arrays, deleting arrays, building objects, all that kind of stuff. So it is something that's maybe not where Bun has its strongest suit. So I'm going to start Bun first, and then we're going to start Node and see how we go. Okay, it looks like we're already done on the TS Node side. It took 53 seconds, and we are still waiting on Bun. Okay, and there we go. Bun is done in 2 minutes and 21 seconds as opposed to about 53 seconds. So Node is what? Well, at least twice as fast, a little bit more. So yeah, definitely for computationally intensive tasks, Bun isn't optimized for that. And I think it actually comes down to the fact that Node and Deno are both on the V8 core for JavaScript, and Bun is on the JavaScript core, which is an entirely different JavaScript VM. Another thing you might run into are some language incompatibilities. I know that when I first did this experiment, there were some language features that I used in TypeScript that weren't supported in Bun versus in Node, or TS Node as it were. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this look into Bun versus Fresh. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions, please put those in the comment section down below. And of course, if you like the video, please hit that like button. And if you really like the video, I would suggest hitting that subscribe button, clicking on that bell, and you'll be notified the next time one of these videos comes out.